In October 1850, George Roberts discovered gold in a quartz outcrop on Ophir Hill in what would become Grass Valley, California. He sold the claim the following year for $350. 39 years later, that same claim, now called the Empire Mine, had produced nearly $5 million in gold. It would go on to produce 5.8 million ounces over 106 years, becoming one of the richest gold mines in North American history. The man who made that possible wasn't American. He wasn't from California. He wasn't even from the same continent where he struck it rich. His name was George Starr. He was 19 years old when he started working at the Empire Mine in 1881. He was Cornish, and he was one of 250,000 miners who left Cornwall, England, between 1861 and 1901 to dig the hardest rock in the world and build the American West while doing it. This is the story of the Cousin Jacks, the men who knew how to go deeper, stay safer, and find richer ore than anyone else on Earth. The men whose expertise transformed American mining from surface scratching into an industrial empire. And the men who sent so much money home that it changed the economy of an entire country. Cornwall, England, sits at the southwestern tip of Britain, a rocky peninsula jutting into the Atlantic Ocean. For over 1,000 years, it had been one of the world's great mining regions: tin, copper, arsenic, lead. The Cornish dug it all from granite bedrock thousands of feet below the surface. By 1850, Cornish miners were extracting much of the world's supply of tin and copper. Some mines descended 3,000 feet, deep enough that a man might climb ladders continuously for an hour just to reach the surface. The work was nasty, brutish, and short. Miners' complexions were pale from never seeing sunlight. Their bodies were stunted from crawling into spaces barely wide enough for a man. They worked in cramped positions all day, hammering granite by candlelight. For this, they earned marginal poverty. Then, in the 1850s and 1860s, everything collapsed. High-grade Cornish copper began playing out at depths of 1,000 feet. Competition from richer deposits in Chile and the United States forced world copper prices down. Tin took a similar hit when Bolivia opened massive new deposits. Mine after mine closed. Unemployment spread like a plague across Cornwall's mining parishes. One Cornish Reverend, R.S. Hawker, wrote in 1862, "They come to me for advice. If they have a few pounds out of the wreck, my advice always is, emigrate. And accordingly, nearly 100 in the current year go across the seas. Our population in 1851 was 1,074. In 1861, it was 868. Cornwall was hemorrhaging people, and across the ocean, America was discovering that it needed exactly what Cornwall was losing: hard rock mining expertise. The California gold rush of 1849 had started with surface placer gold, the kind you could pan from streams or dig with a jackknife. Easy pickings, but by the early 1850s, the easy gold was gone. The real wealth lay deep underground in quartz veins, and extracting it required skills that American miners simply didn't have. Enter the Cornishmen. Some accounts credit James Rickard with being the first Cornish miner to reach the California goldfields. He crossed the Panama Isthmus in 1850 with the first stamp mill to be used in California mines, setting up operations in Coulterville. In 1852, a traveler met several Cornish miners in Hangtown, now Placerville, who said they'd already worked mines from South America to Wisconsin. They were following the ore, just as they'd been trained to do for generations. Word spread quickly. California needed experienced hard rock miners. Cornwall had thousands of unemployed mining experts. Mine owners began actively recruiting Cornishmen, advertising in Cornish newspapers, even paying passage across the Atlantic and overland to California. The miners came in waves, and when American mine foremen were impressed with a Cornishman's work, they'd ask, "Do you know anyone else back in Cornwall who might come work here?" The Cornish miner would reply, "Well, me cousin Jack over in Cornwall be a very good miner, and he should like a new job." It happened so often that the term stuck. Cornish miners became known as Cousin Jacks. Their wives and daughters? Cousin Jennies. The name spread across every mining camp in the American West. And wherever they went, they transformed American mining. By 1890, the population of Grass Valley, California was reportedly 85% Cornish. At one point, the Empire Mine's labor force was 90% Cornish. These weren't just laborers. They brought centuries of accumulated knowledge. They understood how to follow a vein deep underground. They knew how to timber unstable ground properly. They could read rock, predict where it would fracture, where it would hold, where the ore would run rich or peter out. They brought technology Americans had never seen. The Cornish engine, a massive steam-powered pump, could remove 18,000 gallons of water per hour from mine shafts over 1,000 feet deep. Without it, most American mines would have flooded and been abandoned. The Cornish pumps continued to be used in Grass Valley mines until the early 1930s, 60 years after their introduction. They brought terminology that became the standard language of American mining: shaft, level, drift, winzy, crosscut, gallery, raise. If you work in a mine anywhere in the Western Hemisphere today, you're using vocabulary invented in Cornwall centuries ago, and they brought the pasty. That humble hand pie, pastry filled with meat, potatoes, onions, and rutabagas, became standard fare across Western mining camps. A miner could heat it on his shovel over a candle flame deep underground. The crimped edge served as a handle so he wouldn't get dirt and arsenic on the food itself. He'd eat to the crimp, then throw it away as an offering. An offering to what? That depends on who you asked. Some Cornishmen believed in the Tommyknockers, small spirits who lived in the mines and warned of danger by knocking on the rock. Other miners learned that the knocking sounds actually came from timber under stress or rock shifting before a collapse. Either way, the Cornish taught American miners to listen for the knocks, they'd say. When you hear them, evacuate. It was pre-scientific safety culture wrapped in folklore, and it saved lives. But the real story of the Cousin Jacks isn't about folklore. It's about men who worked harder, went deeper, and earned less than anyone imagined possible. George Starr began working at the Empire Mine in 1881 when he was 19 years old. He started as a mucker, the lowest position in the mine, shoveling broken rock into ore cars. In just 6 years, he worked his way up to mine superintendent. That kind of mobility was possible in the Cousin Jack community because skill mattered more than connections. In 1893, Starr left the Empire to work with the famous mining engineer John Hayes Hammond in the gold mines of South Africa. But in 1898, on his way to Alaska, he stopped in San Francisco to visit his cousin, William Bowers-Bourne Jr., the owner of the Empire Mine, persuaded Starr to return to Grass Valley. Starr served as superintendent of the Empire Mine from 1898 until 1929, over 30 years. Under his leadership, the mine modernized, implemented safety protocols learned from South African operations, and became one of the most productive gold mines in California history. Unlike previous managers who lived in San Francisco and treated the mine as a remote business interest, Starr became part of the Grass Valley community. He married a local woman, Elizabeth Libby Blackcrocker, in 1891. He ran a safe mine. The Cornish miners appreciated that. So did their families. Most Cornish families in Grass Valley lived modestly. The miners earned $3 to $3.50 per day for 10-hour shifts underground. That was good money compared to Cornwall, but it wasn't wealth. Still, it was steady work. The mine ran deep and rich. And unlike Cornwall's played-out copper veins, California's gold seemed inexhaustible. The Cornish formed tight-knit communities wherever they settled. In Grass Valley, they built Methodist chapels. Methodism was the dominant religion in Cornwall. They held wrestling matches in the Cornish style. They sang Cornish carols at Christmas. They maintained traditions from home while building new lives in America, and they sent money back. This is where the story gets remarkable. At the end of the 19th century, Cornish miners weren't just enriching themselves or their employers. They were sustaining entire parishes back in Cornwall. In South Africa alone, where Cornish miners dominated the diamond and gold fields of Kimberley and the Witwatersrand, 7,000 miners were sending approximately £1 million per year back to Cornwall in the 1890s. That's roughly $150 million in today's money every year. When the weekly mail from South Africa arrived, people rushed to post offices in Cornish towns like Redruth and Camborne to cash their remittance checks. Local shops did roaring business. Some families who had lived in poverty for generations suddenly had pianos, fine furniture, elaborate hats, gold brooches. The Redruth newspaper declared, "We're living on South Africa." The same pattern played out in California, Montana, Michigan, and Australia. Cornish miners work in the Empire Mine or the Comstock Lode or the copper mines of Butte would send portions of their pay home. These remittances kept families out of workhouses. They funded chapels. They sustained communities that otherwise would have collapsed entirely. It was reverse colonization. Cornwall's greatest export wasn't tin or copper anymore. It was expertise. And that expertise built empires elsewhere while keeping Cornwall alive, but the work itself, it remained brutal. The mines went deeper every year. By 1932, the Empire and North Star mines were physically connected at the 4,600-foot level and the 5,300-foot level. In its final year of operation in 1956, the Empire Mine reached an incline depth of 11,007 feet, over 2 miles down. The underground passages totaled 367 miles. The Cornish miners worked in darkness, in heat, in constant danger. Rockfalls killed men regularly. Dynamite misfired. Silicosis, miners' lung disease caused by breathing rock dust, killed slowly. Many Cornish miners died in their 30s, their lungs destroyed by years underground. In 1917, the worst hard rock mining disaster in American history occurred at the Granite Mountain Speculator Mine in Butte, Montana. Another cousin Jack stronghold. On the evening of June 8th, a fire started 2,400 feet underground when a foreman's carbide lamp accidentally ignited oil-soaked cloth insulation on an electrical cable. The shaft became a chimney. Smoke and toxic gas spread through miles of interconnected tunnels. 168 miners died. Most suffocated underground as the fire consumed their oxygen. Among the dead was Francis Harold Allen, a young Cornish miner who had just received his draft card for World War I. He would have been headed off to war had the fire not intervened. Among the heroes was Manus Duggan, a nipper, a young man who delivered tools to miners deep in the workings. Duggan knew the mine's layout better than almost anyone. When the fire trapped him and 29 other miners, he gathered them in a dead-end tunnel and organized the construction of a bulkhead, a barrier to keep smoke out. They remained there for 36 hours in blistering heat. Finally, Duggan left to find help. He died trying. But 25 of the men he'd bulkheaded in survived because of his knowledge and leadership. 3 days after the disaster, miners across Butte walked off the job in protest of the poor working conditions. A wildcat strike spread through the district the Metal Mine Workers Union formed. Labor unrest that summer would lead to federal troops occupying Butte and the lynching of labor organizer Frank Little. The Speculator disaster marked a turning point. Mining would never again be quite as unregulated, quite as deadly, quite as accepting of men dying underground as a cost of doing business in the Cornish miners. They kept working, because that's what they did. By the 1920s, the era of the cousin Jack was ending. American mining schools graduated engineers who understood geology, metallurgy, and modern extraction techniques. Mechanization reduced the need for skilled hand labor. Corporate consolidation meant that American managers replaced the old Cornish mine captains who had dominated for decades World War II shut down gold mining entirely when the U.S. War Production Board declared it a non-essential industry. After the war, inflation drove mining costs higher while the price of gold remained fixed at $35 per ounce. By the early 1950s, it cost $45 per ounce to extract gold from the Empire Mine. The operation was losing money. In 1956, a miners' strike over falling wages ended operations at the Empire Mine forever. On May 28, 1957, the last Cornish water pumps were shut down and removed. 106 years of continuous mining came to an end. Ellsworth Bennett, a graduate of the Mackay School of Mines, was the last superintendent, the last captain in Cornish terminology. The striking miners allowed him to cross the picket line because they trusted his engineering judgment. They worked with him as a team to safely close the mine. Even at the end, the Cornish tradition of respecting skilled leadership held. Today, you can visit the Empire Mine State Historic Park in Grass Valley. The surface buildings are preserved. The entrance to the 367 miles of underground passages remains sealed. A museum displays or samples mining equipment and a scale model of the underground workings. In Grass Valley, descendants of Cornish miners still sing Cornish carols at Christmas. The tradition has become, as one local historian said, the identity of the town. St. Piran's Day, Cornwall's National Day, is celebrated in Grass Valley every March 5th. In Butte, Montana, the Granite Mountain Speculator Mine Memorial stands on a hill overlooking the Berkeley Pit. It honors not only the 168 men who died in the 1917 fire, but also the 2,500 miners who lost their lives in Butte's mines between 1870 and 1983. Many of them were Cornish. In Michigan's copper country, in Wisconsin's lead mines, in Colorado's silver camps, in South Africa's gold fields, in Australia's Copper Triangle, wherever hard rock mining occurred in the 19th and early 20th centuries, you'll find Cornish names on memorials, Cornish-style engine houses still standing, Methodist chapels built by Cousin Jack congregations. You'll find place names, New Redruth in South Africa, Baragwanath, a Cornish name meaning wheaten bread, now the site of one of the world's largest hospitals in Johannesburg. You'll find Cornish pasties sold in Grass Valley, California, Rio del Monte, Mexico, Munta, Australia, and Johannesburg, South Africa. And if you meet someone with a surname like Trelawney, Penrose, Trembath, or Kiddo working in mining anywhere in the world, there's a good chance their ancestors were Cousin Jacks. The saying in Cornwall was, look in any hard rock mine anywhere on earth and you'll find a Cornishman at the bottom. For 70 years, from the 1850s to the 1920s, that saying was absolutely true. The Cousin Jacks didn't discover gold or silver or copper. They didn't own the mines. They didn't get rich. Most worked their entire lives for daily wages that would seem insulting today. But they knew how to go down farther, dig deeper, work safer, and find richer ore than anyone else on the planet. And when American mine owners needed that expertise, the Cornish brought it, along with their families, their traditions, their food, their hymns, their folklore, and their stubborn pride in skilled work. George Starr worked at the Empire Mine for 48 years. When he retired in 1929, he'd overseen the extraction of millions of dollars in gold. He'd kept his miners safer than most operations of that era. He'd been part of a community that maintained its Cornish identity while fully embracing American life. He died in 1931, just 2 years after retiring. His grave is in Grass Valley, where he'd made his home for half a century. He was buried as he'd lived, as a Cornish miner, as a Cousin Jack, as one of the men who built the American West with hammers, drills, and centuries of knowledge passed down from father to son in the granite hills of Cornwall. When Cornwall's mines collapsed in the 1860s, it could have been the end of a 1,000-year tradition. Instead, 250,000 people carried that tradition across oceans and continents. They transformed mining industries on 5 continents. They sustained communities back home with remittances that totaled millions. They raised families in places like Grass Valley and Butte, where their descendants still live today. And when you visit the Empire Mine State Historic Park and look at the entrance to those 367 miles of tunnels carved 2 miles into the earth, remember, it wasn't just American ambition that made it possible. It was Cornish knowledge, Cornish skill, and Cornish miners willing to go deeper than anyone thought possible. The Cousin Jacks. They came from the oldest mining region in the world to build the newest. And they did it 1 shift at a time, earning $3 a day, working 10 hours underground, breathing rock dust that would kill them young, because that was the job. And the Cousin Jacks knew how to do the job better than anyone else on earth.